Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? As if someone had plucked the thought from your mind, like a ripe fruit from a tree? Maria had been experiencing these moments more frequently lately. Little gaps in her memory that felt like missing puzzle pieces. She'd find herself standing in the kitchen, holding a coffee mug, with no recollection of making coffee. Or discover text messages on her phone to people she couldn't remember contacting. Her husband David worked nights at the hospital. At least, that's what he told her. But when she called the hospital's main desk one evening, they had no record of a David Chen on their staff. The receptionist's voice carried a note of confusion that matched Maria's own growing unease. That night, Maria pretended to sleep. Through barely opened eyes, she watched David slip from their bed at midnight. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had done this many times before. His footsteps were silent on the hardwood floor as he descended to the basement. She had never been in their basement. In 3 years of marriage, David had always insisted it was just storage space, cluttered and unsafe. The door remained locked, and she had never questioned it. Trust, she thought, was the foundation of marriage. But trust was crumbling, like ancient mortar. The next morning, David seemed different. His eyes held a brightness that hadn't been there before, and he hummed while making breakfast. When Maria asked about his night shift, he described treating a car accident victim in vivid detail. Too vivid. She noticed how his hands moved as he spoke, as if he were reliving the experience rather than simply remembering it. Maria began paying attention to patterns. Every few nights, David would disappear to the basement. The following day, he would return with new knowledge, new experiences, new memories that seemed too real to be his own. He'd mention restaurants he'd never visited, movies they'd never watched together, childhood memories that didn't match the stories he'd told her when they first met. She started keeping a journal, documenting the inconsistencies. David claimed to have grown up in Seattle, but now he spoke fondly of summers in Maine. He'd never liked jazz music, yet she found him listening to Miles Davis with the familiarity of a longtime fan. When she questioned these changes, he'd look at her with genuine confusion, as if she were the one misremembering. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Maria was watching the news when a story caught her attention. A local man named Robert Stevens had been found wandering downtown, claiming he couldn't remember his own name or address. The reporter described it as a rare case of severe amnesia, with no apparent medical cause. Maria's blood turned to ice water. She recognized Robert Stevens. He was their neighbor, the one who had helped David move furniture into the basement just last month. The same Robert who David had invited over for dinner, who had shared stories about his military service and his late wife. That night, Maria waited until David's breathing became deep and regular. She slipped from bed and crept downstairs. The basement door stood slightly ajar, which had never happened before. A soft blue light emanated from below, pulsing like a heartbeat. The basement was nothing like the cluttered storage space David had described. The walls were lined with glass containers, each one filled with a swirling, luminescent mist. Labels adorned each container with names, dates, and brief descriptions. Robert Stevens, military service, 1987-1991. Eleanor Walsh, first kiss, age 16. Marcus Thompson, wedding day, June 15, 2003. There were hundreds of them. In the center of the room sat an elaborate device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and an ancient ritual altar. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting to a chair that resembled something from a dentist's office, but wrong. Straps hung from the armrests, and a helmet-like apparatus dangled above the headrest. Maria's hands trembled as she examined the containers more closely. Each one held someone's stolen experiences, their most precious memories harvested and preserved like specimens in a laboratory. She found Robert Stevens's entire life reduced to a dozen glowing jars. Then she saw her own name. The container labeled Maria Chen, Childhood Summers with Grandmother, sat on a shelf at eye level. The mist inside swirled with golden warmth, and she could almost smell her grandmother's apple pie through the glass. But the memory felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Behind her, footsteps creaked on the wooden stairs. David appeared in the doorway, no longer the man she had married. His face held an expression of mild disappointment, like a parent catching a child sneaking cookies before dinner. You weren't supposed to find this yet, he said, his voice carrying an odd resonance, as if multiple people were speaking through his mouth. I was hoping to collect a few more years before you noticed. Maria backed against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. What are you? I'm a curator, David replied, moving closer. I collect experiences, preserve them, study them. Humans live such brief, beautiful lives, and when they die, all those precious memories simply vanish. I save them. You're stealing people's lives. I'm preserving them. Do you know how many incredible experiences are lost every day? First loves, final words, moments of pure joy that die with their hosts. I give them immortality. Maria's eyes darted to the machine in the center of the room. How long have you been taking mine? David's smile was almost gentle. Since our first date. You were so vibrant, so full of life. I couldn't resist sampling just a taste. But you kept creating new memories, new experiences. You became my favorite collection. The room spun around Maria as she realized the truth. How many of her memories were actually hers? How much of her identity had been slowly siphoned away, night after night, while she slept beside the man she thought she loved? The beautiful thing about memory, David continued, is that people rarely notice when pieces go missing. The mind fills in the gaps, creates new connections. You've been helping me perfect the process. Maria looked at the hundreds of containers, each one representing a life partially or completely drained. What happens to them? To the people you steal from? They continue existing, just simplified, reduced to their basic functions. They eat, sleep, work, but they don't really live anymore. They become empty vessels, which is oddly peaceful, don't you think? She thought of Robert Stevens, wandering the streets with no memory of his own name, of all the other victims whose experiences now decorated David's basement like trophies. You're a monster, she whispered. David shook his head. I'm a preservationist, and you, my dear Maria, are my masterpiece. I've been so careful with you, taking only the most exquisite moments. But I think it's time for the final harvest. He moved toward the machine, and Maria realized with growing horror that she couldn't remember how to get back upstairs. The basement's layout had become foreign to her, as if the knowledge of her own home had been stolen along with everything else. As David powered up the device, its blue light casting dancing shadows on the walls, Maria wondered if she would remember this moment tomorrow, or if tomorrow she would wake up as empty as all the others, another hollow shell in David's collection of forgotten lives. The machine hummed to life, and Maria Chen began to forget her own name.